Speaker.
I call Ms Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'm happy to take a call on this, the Rugby World Cup 2011 Empowering Bill, and much like my colleague Trevor Mallard, I rise more in sadness than in anger to say that that the Labour Party will be opposing this piece of legislation. And I'm rising to speak against it effectively, although most of my comments in fact will be in favour of the provisions of this piece of legislation, because I think overall it's a good bill, and I think that the Select Committee have done a very good job of working their way through what is a reasonably complex and straightforward piece of legislation at the same time. And I think the Committee of the Whole House has debated quite extensively the provisions of this piece of legislation, and quite constructively for the most part as well. The reason that I am opposed to this piece of legislation really boils down simply to one issue, and that is the extent to which the Minister in this case, the Honourable Murray McCulley, should be given unbridled power to overturn decisions of the Rugby World Cup Authority, and not only overturn a decision in a negative fashion, in other words, to retain the status quo, but also overturn a decision and therefore approve something that the authority has deemed would be inappropriate. Nathan Guy talked about, in his speech, the Minister Nathan Guy, the Junior Minister on behalf of the Senior Minister, and perhaps on that note, could I say, if that was his audition speech, you might want to, I wouldn't be clearing the diary for Monday, for the Cabinet meeting on Monday, but he talked about the unelected officials and the fact that these decisions shouldn't be left to unelected officials, they should be given to elected officials. I actually think that's totally the wrong approach to take. And the question that I'd have for the Minister is, where does he draw the line on that? Because there are a heck of a lot of decisions that the courts currently take, and that judges currently take, and that various unelected panels currently take, to do with matters very, very similar to this. And if the government's new rule of operation is going to be that all of these decisions should be taken by elected officials, that's opening a whole can of worms, and they may really regret going down that road at some future point, because if this sets a precedence for how they're going to be approaching future pieces of legislation, I think that would be very concerning if they said that controversial decisions should now be taken by elected officials rather than have the independence of a judiciary or of an independent panel. And I think that, as Trevor Mallard pointed out, we are one of the least corrupt countries in the world, and we constantly rank very well in our level of transparency, openness, and the quality of the decision making, and the quality of the one could ask Pansy Wong, and the quality of the decision making by
Hayes has talked about Pansy.
That's right, and the quality of the decision made by our central government agencies. And one of the reasons for that is that in most cases there's a very clear arm's length relationship between ministers and the bureaucracy who administer things. In this case, that arm's length relationship is being seriously compromised by the Rugby World Cup Empowering Bill, and I think that's something that all New Zealanders should be concerned about, because it is a trend that we are increasingly seeing from this government. And all parties in the House were criticised for the Canterbury earthquake legislation. The Labour Party voted in favour of that. What I would point out is that this bill actually goes further than the Canterbury earthquake legislation. Orders in council made under that Canterbury earthquake recovery legislation go to the Regulations Review Committee, and there is a provision, therefore, in this House for those to be overturned. There is no such provision for decisions in this bill for decisions that the Minister makes. So there are less safeguards. A similar power is being given to the Minister as was given in the case of the Canterbury earthquake legislation, but with no safeguard, without the safeguard that we put in the Canterbury earthquake legislation. Yes, it does. I guess it does have to go to more than one minister, but again, I say to Mr Hayes, the Minister does not need to follow the advice of those other ministers. So the Minister ultimately has that ultimate power. They get the recommendation from the authority, they have to consult with other ministers, but then they can do whatever they like. So Murray McCulley can still do whatever he likes. And this is not a minister who, when it comes to meddling in administrative matters, has a particularly clear track record. We only need to go back to the last time he was in government and look at the tourism board fiasco to find that he has a history of dabbling in things that he shouldn't. And so I'd been very concerned by that particular provision. Overall, one can hope that he's learned from his mistakes, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Speaker, this is a really exciting opportunity for New Zealand, and it's disappointing to be an opposition member speaking against this piece of legislation, because I'm very excited about the Rugby World Cup coming to New Zealand next year. And the Labour Party, right from the very beginning, when as Trevor Mallard pointed out, the bid was first mooted for the hosting of the Rugby World Cup under the tenure of the previous Labour government, we have endeavoured to take a bipartisan approach, or a cross-party approach, involving all of the parties, to ensure that this is a New Zealand incorporated approach to the hosting of the Rugby World Cup. And we have worked very constructively, I think, with the new national government since they were elected 2 years ago, to make sure that this event will be successful for New Zealand. It is going to be the largest event we have ever hosted, and it is important that we get it right. And as Nathan Guy said in his speech, this will be the largest event we have ever hosted in New Zealand, I say to Paul Quinn. I say to Nathan Guy mentioned there's no opportunity for second chances. Well, there aren't opportunities for second chances. That's one of the reasons it's important that we get the process aspects of this legislation right, and we haven't done in this bill. But I'll put that aside for a moment and just concentrate on why it's important that we do get it right. 4 billion people potentially will be watching this event around the world on television. 70,000 odd visitors will be coming to New Zealand to take part in Rugby World Cup related events.
Some of those visitors are to Australia, the same as Australian coming twice.
And that's quite true. And it's going to be a significant boost to the New Zealand economy, generating $1.2 billion worth of economic activity. So it's going to be something of the scale of which we have never seen here before. So it's really exciting for New Zealand, and I know that the 4 million New Zealanders who live here are going to be 100% behind it and are going to be doing everything we can to make sure that the event is an absolute success. The government, of course, are going to do well out of it as well, an estimated $112 odd million in extra tax revenue that they're going to be generated out of Rugby World Cup related activities. So it's important we get it right, and that's why this piece of legislation is important, notwithstanding the reservations I've just raised. We're going to be under tight timeframes to make sure everything is in place. We're going to need to make sure that the government can move quickly to remedy any issues that arise as we move closer to the Rugby World Cup. So overall, thank you, the provisions in this piece of legislation I think are pretty sound. Now, just to briefly canvass those, the liquor licensing provisions I think are very sensible. I have no problems with that. The point Jackie Dean made in her speech is one that I actually raised in the committee stage. In my view, it doesn't extend any of the powers of liquor licensing beyond what would already be available. It simply truncates the process and speeds them up a bit. So that's one of the reasons why I have no qualms about supporting that. I'm pleased about the provisions that the Select Committee agreed on gambling, to ensure that the opportunities for gambling aren't extended under this piece of legislation, because that's not the intention. I'm pleased that we worked through quite carefully the issues around how this should be supported administratively, and having local authorities supporting the Rugby World Cup Authority administratively makes sense. First of all, because it doesn't create a temporary bureaucracy that would only be established and then disbanded after a short period of time, but also it means the authority are going to have available to them all of the necessary expertise. And in dealing with consenting issues, other local authority related issues, having access to that quality of information, that expertise and knowledge of local areas is going to be really important for the authority. So I think overall the provisions put in place for the Administrative Secretariat are the right things to do. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased with most of what this bill contains. I'm very pleased that the Rugby World Cup is going to be hosted in New Zealand. I hope to... I don't think I can afford, actually, to go to any of the events myself, to go to any of the matches myself, but I'll certainly be, like the 4 million other Kiwis, watching on TV and cheering the All Blacks along.